The day I discovered my relationship was a lie, I found my name inside a file called Subject of Observation Number 27. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't password protected. It was sitting on the main desktop of the laptop belonging to the woman who said she loved me. And the worst part, the file had been updated for over 3 years. It all started on an absurdly normal afternoon. Rain tapped against the windows with that gentle persistence that turns any house into a warm refuge. She had gone to the supermarket, leaving me alone in the apartment we had shared for 2 years. I remember I was making coffee while a playlist played, one we called Our Soundtrack, songs that, up until that moment, I believe told our story. Her laptop was on the dining table, open, on something she never did. She was obsessively careful with her belongings. She always logged out, locked screens, even placed her laptop in her backpack if she was just going to the bathroom. She said it was a habit from her job, that she handled sensitive information. But that day, the screen glowed as if it were waiting for me. At first, I didn't want to look. Because when you love someone, you trust them, even when something inside you whispers that you shouldn't. I tried to ignore it. I poured the coffee. I sat on the couch. I tried to focus on my phone. Couldn't. There was something strange about the way the screen displayed multiple folders organized by dates. Not normal names, not work documents. They were cold, clinical combinations, like they belonged in a laboratory. My gaze kept returning to it, until I saw the folder with my name. Not a nickname. Not love. Not us. My full name. A chill ran down my spine as if someone had opened a window in the middle of winter. I remember nervously smiling, trying to convince myself it would be something romantic. Maybe photos, letters, memories. Because she was like that, detail-oriented, meticulous, perfect. Or at least, that's what I believed. I opened the folder. Inside were dozens of subfolders organized by month, starting from the exact day we met. My breathing became slow, heavy, unreal. I opened the first one. It was an audio recording. I pressed play. First encounter successful. The subject shows an empathetic personality. Responds positively to prolonged eye contact. Her voice sounded calm, professional, distant. Took me several seconds to realize the voice was hers. My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a university project. Maybe a fictional experiment. Maybe anything except what it looked like. I opened another file. Video. It was me on our first date. I was sitting across from her in the cafe where everything began. I smiled nervously, playing with my coffee spoon. I remembered that moment perfectly. I was telling her how I had lost my father and how that made me value real connections more. In the video, the camera was hidden, pointed directly at my face. And then I heard her voice again, off camera. The subject responds with emotional openness when stimulated with questions about personal loss. Trust level increased by 35%. The air vanished from the room. My hands began to shake. I closed the video, but my fingers didn't obey. I accidentally opened another file. It was a document. There were tables, graphs, psychological analyses. Every argument we had was recorded. Every reconciliation analyzed. Every gesture of affection classified. My stomach tightened when I saw a section titled Affective Bond Simulation, Stage 2, Deep Romantic Attachment. I stood up abruptly, spilling some coffee onto the carpet. I needed to get away, breathe, wake up, convince myself it was a sick joke or some kind of mistake. But then I noticed something worse. There was a folder labeled Contingency Protocols, and inside a document called Expected Reactions if the subject discovers the project. A ringing filled my ears. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my chest. I opened the file. The first lines read, "The subject displays high emotional attachment. High probability of initial psychological collapse. It is recommended to apply verbal containment based on shared memories to regain narrative control of the situation." I had to sit down. Not because I wanted to, but because my legs stopped responding. I read my name repeated dozens of times. I read predictions about how I would react. I read phrases she was supposed to tell me word for word. Phrases I had heard before. Phrases I believed were spontaneous. At that moment, a memory struck me violently. The night I asked her why she loved me, and she answered exactly as it was written in that document. Nausea hit me. I wanted to close the laptop, but something forced me to keep looking. There was one last folder. It had no date. It simply said, "Final phase." My reflection trembled on the screen as I moved the cursor toward it. It felt like opening that file would be like unlocking a door I would never be able to close again. The sound of a key turning in the front door froze me. She had returned. I heard her footsteps approaching down the hallway, calm, familiar, dangerously normal. The cursor remained over the folder. My heart pounded so loudly I feared she could hear it from the entrance. Then the apartment door opened. "Love, I'm back," she said with the same sweetness as always. I lifted my gaze toward the hallway, then back to the screen. And in that instant, I noticed something that froze my blood. The folder "Final Phase" had just been updated, exactly at the moment she walked through the door. I didn't close the laptop. Not because I was brave, but because fear had completely paralyzed me. I could hear her footsteps approaching from the hallway, the sound of grocery bags brushing against her legs, the soft clinking of keys hitting each other. Ordinary sounds, normal, that, at that moment, felt like part of a scene rehearsed thousands of times. The Final Phase folder still glowed in front of me. And then I remembered what I had read minutes earlier. Apply verbal containment based on shared memories. My throat went dry. I slammed the laptop shut just as her silhouette appeared at the dining room entrance. "What are you doing sitting there in the dark?" she asked with a gentle smile, placing the grocery bags on the table. The same smile that made me fall in love. The same smile that now felt artificial. "Nothing. I was just waiting for you to get back," I replied, trying to keep my voice from shaking. She walked closer, kissed my forehead, and began putting groceries away in the kitchen. Her naturalness was perfect. Too perfect. I watched every movement with a strange sensation, like I was watching an actress perform the most convincing role of her life. "I bought your favorite cereal," she said without looking at me. "It was on sale." My chest tightened. That was one of the details I always bragged about when I talked about her to my friends. I used to say she knew me better than anyone, that she remembered even the smallest things. Now I didn't know if that was love or behavioral study. "Is everything okay? You seem off," she asked, turning toward me. A brutal urge surged inside me to ask her everything. To scream. To demand answers. But another line from the document echoed in my mind. The subject will emotionally confront during the early discovery phases. And then I realized something terrifying. If I reacted, I would be following the exact script she expected. "I'm just tired," I lied. She studied me for a few seconds, as if evaluating something on my face, then smiled again. "Come on, I made you hot chocolate. It's cold outside." That sentence pierced my chest. Because I remembered another folder, another recording, where she said, "Hot beverages generate a sense of security in the subject." I accepted the chocolate. Not because I wanted it, but because I needed to understand how far all of this went. We sat on the couch. She rested her head on my shoulder, exactly like she always did when we watched movies. Her breathing was calm, rhythmic, as if nothing in the world was out of control. But inside me, everything was collapsing. "You know what I was thinking about today?" she suddenly said. My body tensed. "What?" I asked. "Our first trip together, when we got lost looking for that viewpoint. I think that's when I knew I wanted to spend my life with you." I felt the blood drain from my face, because I remembered that trip perfectly, and I also remembered reading something about that moment in the files. I forced a smile. "I remember it too," I said. She looked up at me and, for a brief moment, her eyes seemed to scan me, as if she were confirming whether my response matched some invisible expectation. That night, I barely spoke. I just observed, listened, memorized. I waited until she fell asleep. Her deep breathing was the signal. I slowly got out of bed, careful not to make any noise. The apartment was dim, barely illuminated by city lights filtering through the curtains. The laptop was still on the table. When I opened it, the final phase folder was gone. My pulse skyrocketed. I searched frantically through the files. I navigated through every folder, every document, every recording, until I found something new. A folder that hadn't been there before. Post-discovery monitoring. I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. I opened it. Inside were logs with exact timestamps. The first one read, 1842, subject accesses main files. My breathing stopped. I scrolled down. 1847, subject shows visible signs of anxiety. Probable reading of contingency document. My hand began to tremble. I kept reading, unable to stop. 1903, subject decides to conceal discovery. Expected response confirmed. I felt like someone was watching me from the apartment's darkness. I looked toward the hallway. Everything was silent. I returned to the document. Narrative control level, stable. My chest began to ache. But the worst part was at the end of the log. There was a note written minutes before she went to sleep. The subject still does not understand the full scope of the project. And below it, another line. One that made my stomach drop into absolute emptiness. Prepare progressive revelation material. The objective is not only to observe behavior, but to document the complete process of emotional breakdown. I closed the document with sweaty hands. I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to wake up from this nightmare. But something inside me needed to know more. I kept exploring the files until I found a folder titled Comparative Profiles. Inside were several subfolders with names I didn't recognize. People. I opened one at random. There were photos of a smiling man, conversation screenshots, psychological analyses, date records. The pattern was identical. A glacial cold ran down my spine when I saw the final label on the file. Subject status. Project completed. My throat tightened. I opened another folder. Same structure. Same process. Same ending. Then I returned to my folder, desperately searching for a similar section. And I found it. Subject status. Project ongoing. I stared at that sentence for what felt like hours, until I heard something behind me. A soft creak of the wooden floor. I slowly turned my head. She was standing in the hallway, silently watching me. Her face was partially covered by shadow, but her eyes shone with a calmness that froze my blood. "I knew you would eventually reach that part," she said softly. The laptop remained open in front of me. The files exposed. My world destroyed. "How long have you been awake?" I asked, my voice broken. She tilted her head slightly, as if evaluating my emotional state. and she smiled. Since before you opened the computer. The silence between us was so dense it seemed to fill the entire room. She remained leaning against the hallway frame, watching me with that impossible calm, as if she were observing an expected result in an experiment that had taken years to develop. I didn't know what terrified me more. That she knew I had discovered everything, or that she seemed completely calm about it. You weren't supposed to find it yet, she said, taking a step toward me, but I guess the process had to accelerate at some point. I felt something inside me slowly breaking. Process? I managed to say. She sighed, as if the conversation was inevitable, as if she had been preparing for this moment for a long time. We should talk when you're calmer. Her tone was soft, warm, exactly the same tone she used when I had a bad day, when she hugged me, when she told me everything would be okay. But now every word sounded like a hollow echo. No, I replied, slamming the laptop shut. We're talking now. For a second, her expression changed. Not sadness, not guilt. Evaluation. Then she slowly walked to the couch and sat across from me, folding her hands over her knees, adopting a posture so controlled she looked like a therapist waiting for her patient to speak. All right, she said, ask whatever you need to ask. I stared at her, searching her face for any trace of the woman I thought I knew. Who are you? I asked. She blinked slowly, and for the first time she hesitated. The same person who has been with you all this time. No, I whispered. That person didn't study me like I was an experiment. The silence returned. She lowered her gaze for a few seconds, then looked back up. You can't understand it yet. A mixture of fury and desperation rose through my chest. Then explain it, I said, feeling my voice begin to crack. Explain why there are folders with other men, why there are psychological analyses about me, why something called final phase exists. She didn't answer immediately. She slowly stood up and walked into the kitchen. She poured water into a glass, took a sip. Her movements were precise, controlled, as if she needed to organize her thoughts before continuing. Not everything is what it seems, she finally said. That sentence hit me like an insult. I've read your logs, I replied. I've listened to your recordings. You've been measuring every reaction I have, every emotion, every intimate moment. She closed her eyes for a moment. It wasn't just about you. I felt the world stop. Then what was it about? She didn't respond. And in that silence, I understood something. She wasn't going to tell me the truth. Not yet. I grabbed my jacket and walked toward the door. I need to get out of here. If you leave now, she said calmly, you'll fill the gaps with assumptions, and that will destroy you faster. I stopped. Not because of her words, but because they sounded exactly like a line I had read in her documents. That made me leave. I wandered for hours. The city was damp from the recent rain. The lights reflected on the asphalt looked distorted, as if everything around me was losing its shape, just like my life. My mind replayed memories nonstop. Our first laugh together. Our first fight. The night she confessed she was afraid of losing me. Every memory now felt contaminated. Every gesture possibly calculated. I ended up sitting in an empty park, staring at my phone with trembling hands. I knew that if I wanted to understand everything, I had to go beyond her. I had to search her past. I remembered seeing names in the files, other subjects, other projects. I returned to the apartment at dawn. She wasn't there. The bed was made. The laptop closed. And on the table there was a cup of hot coffee, as if she knew I would come back. Nausea hit me. I opened the laptop again. This time the password had been changed. But there was something new. A file on the desktop titled, "If you decide to continue." My pulse spiked. I opened it. It was a video. She appeared sitting in the same living room where I was now, wearing different clothes, probably recorded days earlier. "If you're watching this, it means you decided to keep searching," she said, looking directly into the camera. "And it also means emotional attachment is stronger than fear. That is consistent with your profile." My hands began to sweat. "I know you're trying to reconstruct my past right now," she continued, "and you'll probably succeed. But there are things you need to know before you do, because you might discover truths that aren't related to me, but to you." My breathing became irregular. "You were not chosen at random." The world seemed to tilt. "Your psychological profile, your emotional history, your way of processing abandonment, all of that made you the ideal candidate." The video paused for a few seconds, as if she had deliberately stopped speaking. "But there is something that was never part of the protocol," she finally continued, "something that changed the entire project." Her voice cracked slightly. It was the first real emotion I had seen from her since all of this began. I wasn't supposed to become emotionally involved. The video ended abruptly. I stared at the black screen, trying to process what I had just heard. But something on the desktop caught my attention. A folder I had never seen before. Observer evaluation. A chill ran through me. I opened it slowly. Inside there was a document with my name. Again. But this time it wasn't about my emotions. It was about my reactions to betrayal. I scanned the text until I found an underlined section. The subject shows an unusual ability to reconstruct narratives. There is a risk that he may attempt to replicate the process if he discovers the full structure of the experiment. My heart began pounding violently. I kept reading, unable to stop, until I reached the final line. A line that made the air disappear from my lungs. Secondary hypothesis. The subject may not only be part of the study, but its continuation. I heard the apartment door open behind me. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. Because in that moment, I understood something far more disturbing than any lie. Maybe I hadn't only been observed. Maybe I was being prepared to observe someone else. "You've come too far to stop now," her voice said behind me. I didn't turn around immediately. Her footsteps echoed behind me with a calmness that felt unbearable. Every sound seemed synchronized with the frantic pounding of my heart. "You've already come too far to stop now," she repeated. I slowly closed the laptop. "How far did you want me to go?" I asked without looking at her. The silence lasted several seconds. I could feel her presence just a few meters away, motionless, watching me, analyzing every breath, every microgesture, just like she always had. "As far as you decided," she finally answered. I let out a dry, broken laugh. "No, that's a lie. Nothing in this relationship depended on me." I stood up and turned toward her. Her eyes reflected something I had never seen before. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't coldness. It was exhaustion. A deep exhaustion accumulated over years. "I need you to tell me the complete truth," I said. "No protocols. No analysis. No scripts." She held my gaze. And for the first time, she seemed to truly hesitate. "The complete truth isn't just one thing," she whispered. "Start from the beginning." She slowly walked toward the couch and sat down, as if she knew what she was about to say would destroy what little remained between us. I stayed standing. I didn't want to sit. I didn't want to relax. I didn't want to appear vulnerable. "I work for a behavioral psychological research project," she began. "We study how people build emotional bonds, how they react to attachment, betrayal, loss, and how they reconstruct their identity after emotional collapse." I felt the air grow heavier. "Using real people?" I asked. "Yes." "Deceiving them for years?" She didn't respond immediately. The study analyzes relationships created from scratch, she continued. Relationships designed to appear organic, authentic, inevitable. Nausea rose inside me. So everything was planned, I said. The initial meeting, yes. Our first date? Yes. Our trip? Living together? Future plans? She slowly closed her eyes. Yes and no. That answer ignited a silent fury inside me. Don't play with me. She opened her eyes again, and this time her gaze didn't seem calculating. It seemed broken. I was supposed to follow an emotional protocol. I had to build a controlled bond, measure your development, record every stage of attachment. My chest burned. And the other subjects? I asked. Were they relationships like this too? She lowered her gaze. Yes. I felt something inside me collapse completely. How many? She didn't answer. How many? I repeated louder. 7 before you. The number hit me like a hammer. And what happened to them? Her silence was the most terrifying answer. The project ends when the bond reaches its peak level of emotional dependency, and then it is broken in a controlled way, she finally said. My hands began to tremble. Controlled? The psychological rupture process is documented, along with the recovery phase. I stepped back. So, you destroy people to study them. It's not that simple, she whispered. Yes, it is. Silence filled the room again. I should never have continued with you for so long, she suddenly said. That sentence confused me. Why? She took a deep breath, as if she were crossing a line she had never crossed before. Because I broke the protocol. A hollow feeling opened in my stomach. The study establishes a maximum duration of 18 months, she continued. After that, the bond becomes unpredictable for the observer. My mind struggled to process it. We were together for 3 years. She slowly nodded. I refused to close your project. The world seemed to stop. Why? The question left me before I could stop it. She lifted her gaze. Her eyes were shining, wet, human. Because I stopped observing you and started caring about you. A brutal blow struck my chest. For a second, everything inside me wanted to believe her. But the files, the recordings, the analyses, the other subjects. I don't know which part of that is true, I whispered. I don't fully know either, she answered. That confession disarmed me more than any lie. When I tried to close your case, the committee rejected the request, she continued. They said your profile was too valuable, that your emotional development had exceeded every projection. My pulse began racing again. What does that mean? She hesitated. That the study stopped being only about observing you. The silence became unbearable. Then what is it about now? She swallowed. Replicating you. I felt the floor disappear beneath my feet. Your ability to create attachment, your way of rebuilding trust, your emotional resilience, all of that is extremely rare. The committee believes you can become the model for a second phase of the project. My breathing turned erratic. What second phase? She looked directly at me, without softening anything. Turning you into an observer. The impact was so strong I had to lean against the table. No, I whispered. That's not going to happen. It already started, she answered softly. The world spun. What do you mean? She slowly pointed at the closed laptop on the table. Since you discovered the files, you've been following the exact pattern we've recorded in potential observers. Panic rose through my throat. That's absurd. You reconstructed memories, investigated patterns, analyzed behavior. You even anticipated my responses several times. My mind raced, remembering every decision I had made since the discovery. That doesn't make me one of you. She slowly stood up. "Noah, not yet." The silence stretched endlessly. "The committee wants me to continue with you, but now as training." My chest burned. "And what do you want?" The question came out loaded with something I still couldn't define: anger, fear, or a final hope. She watched me for several seconds. Then she spoke with a voice that sounded completely different from anything I had heard before. "I want you to leave." I blinked, confused. "If you stay, they will absorb you into the project. They will turn your pain into data, your recovery into a replicable model, and eventually, you'll forget where the experiment ends and where your life begins." Silence fell like a slab of concrete between us. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She smiled faintly, sadly. "Because if I really cared about you, this is the only way to prove it." She walked toward the table, picked up an envelope I hadn't noticed before, and placed it in front of me. "There are addresses, names, and project records inside. If you choose to destroy them, the study loses years of work." The envelope felt heavier than anything I had ever held in my life. "And if I don't?" I whispered. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and resignation. "Then the project continues with you as the next step." The silence broke with the distant sound of a siren outside. "Is that them?" I asked. She didn't respond. She simply walked toward the apartment door and opened it. "You have 10 minutes to decide who you're going to be when this is over." She left without looking back. I remained alone, with the envelope in my hands, with 3 years of my life turned into evidence, with a decision that could destroy a system or make me part of it. And then I noticed something written on the inside corner of the envelope, in her handwriting. A short sentence. A sentence that made my heart stop completely. "If you choose to stay, you will never know if I ever loved you."